Welcome, everyone. My name is Brian Ward. I am the Senior Director of Video Production and Digital Media at Shout Factory. We have the, we're very proud to be presenting this documentary on Blu-ray and DVD, which you can even pick up downstairs at our booth at 4118. But it's not a commercial. We're here to celebrate. We're here to celebrate what I think many of us in the room might, probably, do consider the best Star Trek series in the franchise. Star Trek: The Next Generation. Sorry. Deep Space Nine. See, you all cheered way too early. Basically, we wanted to do that by presenting this documentary that was made by several members of the cast and the crew, not just as a love letter to themselves and one another, but also to a love letter to the fans who stuck behind them through thick and thin, even during a time when the series was sort of considered the middle child and not given the love it deserved. So that documentary is called What We Left Behind, looking back at Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Who here has seen this documentary? Who amongst you saw it during the Fathom screening, one night only? All right, now this is where we really find out what kinds of folks we're dealing with. Who here backed the campaign? Then this night is just as much a celebration for all of you as it is for all of us. First, we want to give you a preview of the trailer, so let's take a look at that now.
I started to think about the title of this final episode, which is What You Leave Behind. And I started to think, what have we left behind?
We've wanted to make a Star Trek show that would satisfy a Star Trek audience, but different.
We had this big black captain in your face. America, come and look at me, and I'm running your show, and this is the face of it.
One of the things that attracted me about the Star Trek was that I would be human, completely human, and brown, too. See?
It was dark and dirty, and the characters didn't all get along.
Nothing was black and white. She was a terrorist.
The show spoke about nuances of war that people don't know.
It was something totally different in the world of Star Trek.
If people aren't bothered by it or don't like it, you're doing something wrong.
With all due respect, Deep Space Nine is not really Star Trek.
It's not true. We did wonderful, painful work. It was often very painful to do.
It pissed us off.
I did feel like Alice in Wonderland being dropped into this amazing world.
I never felt appreciated on the show.
I think there was a serious intent about the work, perhaps a more serious intent.
Oh, well, I didn't know that because it seemed very funny to me.
That anger is mine! You can't have it!
I don't think that ever happened.
Don't dismiss me. Talk to me.
Only the people involved know the facts.
This is Rashomon.
It's Rashomon.
We have no idea.
Everybody
I'm
has a
so
different
glad
point of
I
view.
asked this question.
Next.
We're in Vegas right now with a ton of people downstairs. They love this show. It just took them 20 years to get here.
It went where no one has gone before. It pursued the journey inside, not the journey out.
I wish I could go back and relive that just one more time.
It was like a family on the show, you know? It was like a family on the show.
That 7 years changed my life.
That's very emotional, you know?
Guess what? This is Deep Space Nine. Don't get too comfortable.
A trailer gets me every single time I see it. Frankly, it always makes me want to watch the movie. I hope you feel the same. But for now, let's talk to some of the folks who made that movie possible. If you've seen The Captains, or For the Love of Spock, you know his work. Please welcome co-director David Zappone. David. Shouldn't have had that. All the way in the end? Right here. You're right here. Oh, right here. You certainly know this man's work. He was the co-director of this documentary, but he was also the showrunner of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I'm not going to get a single word out. Ira, Stephen Behr. If we have a favorite Cardassian, I'm sure it's the one played by this gentleman, Garak himself, Mr. Andy Robinson. We saw him grow up right before our eyes. Jake, Sisko, Mr. Cirroc, Lofton. We also saw this gentleman grow up before our eyes, but under a lot more makeup. The most noble of the Ferengi, Nog, Mr. Aron Eisenberg.
Thank you.
Got a couple more. We loved her as Kasidy. And frankly, let's be honest, she's on the best Star Trek show since Deep Space Nine right now. Well, I'm talking about the Orville, Miss Penny Johnson Jerald. Finally, one of my favorite people in the world. I feel humbled just to be able to call her my friend. She's as close to Leeta as you could possibly imagine, intelligent and very empathetic. Please welcome Miss Chase Masterson. So we've got a very short amount of time to get a whole lot in, but I just want to ask David, because this all started with you walking up to Ira in Las Vegas during a convention. You had already been doing The Captains at the time. Why this documentary? Why now?
Well, the simple answer is Deep Space Nine, and don't tell Bill Shatner this, but it was always my favorite Star Trek. I loved it. And I had, as you pointed out, had done William Shatner's The Captains, William Shatner's Get a Life, William Shatner's Chaos on the Bridge, and I think you guys will see a theme there. And it was clear that Bill was not going to do anything about Deep Space Nine. He had done enough Star Trek, but Ira and I had met each other during Get a Life and Chaos on the Bridge, which was about the Next Generation. So I really felt that Deep Space Nine deserved this treatment, this full-length documentary. So I approached Ira, and that turned out to be the worst day of his life, I guess.
One of many since.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's how it happened.
But Ira, you've talked about the fact that you were sort of promised, even though you didn't know what story you were going to tell, that you would find it in the footage. Talk a little bit about that, finding that story, realizing that this was going to become a love letter both to and from the cast to the fans and back.
I wish I had been able to articulate it to myself that simply when we began this, but I was about to do another show, Outlander, for a couple of years. I was going to Scotland quite a bit. So I thought this was going to be a simple kind of other job I would do in between my real job. And it was an hour doc at the time. It sounded simple. It was going to just be interviewing some of the actors and some of the, not even the crew really at that point.
No, we hadn't.
Just the actors. So it sounded simple, sounded easy. But then it kind of grew in the telling, and once I got the idea to do the season 8, episode 1 with the writing staff, how we were going to do that in an hour episode, I still don't understand, but that was the thought at the time. But then it started to grow and grow and grow, and then it turned into this monster that it became.
I want to talk a little bit about that writing staff, putting those core members of the writing team together in a room for the first time in a really long time to actually try to break a story that you knew inevitably would never be shot. Describe that experience.
Well, the day was fantastic. I mean, look, we all knew, you know, it's not like we hadn't seen, we had never been in the room, all of us together at the same time. That's true. But, I mean, I was working with Ron, I had worked with Robert on multiple shows, I'd worked with Renee. You know, we all were still buddies, so that wasn't the thing. The thing was getting a chance to sit for one day and actually talk about Deep Space Nine. Within minutes, it was just like it was back to the 90s, and nothing had changed. I mean, people were still passionate. Yes, some of us forgot certain elements that, you know, we should have probably remembered, like where people wound up at times and who died where and how, and there was a lot of that, but that's to be expected after that length of time. But it was great. I mean, we if it wasn't for the big lunch that had been ordered, that kind of made us all a little...
I over-ordered. It was Chinese food, yes.
And yes, so we ate, we had a huge lunch, and after that, man, you know, usually we don't, we'd break story in the morning, eat, and then we'd go off and write. Or the other way around, we'd vary it up. But to spend the whole day in the room just trying to figure out a whole episode, you know, that was intense, and we were starting to fade. But it was a great day. I mean, you know, everyone was all smiles. It was nice. But it was never meant to be a show. It was never meant to lead to anything. It was meant to just show all of you what it's like to sit in a writer's room with that cast of writers and how we did it. And that was the whole purpose of it. So don't worry, you know, whether you like parts of it or didn't like parts of it, it's never going anywhere. That's all it was supposed to be, one day.
I want to ask the cast, clearly a lot of you do a lot of conventions. You spend a lot of time on stages like this one, doing Q&As for fans like these. But now the person asking the question is your old friend, your old colleague, sitting there having a casual conversation that happens to be recorded. Did you find yourself breaking down any barriers, any walls, maybe telling stories that you didn't expect to tell?
Wow.
Someone say something.
Whoa. I think I'm a pretty honest person. And so no matter if it's a fan or if it's a producer or creator of my character, I found myself in a position where I truly believed it was a bittersweet interview, in that I was so missing the chemistry that I had on Star Trek. I don't know about you guys, but if you've ever fallen in love with someone who knows what's happening in your mind, what's happening with your body when you move somewhere, it is so intense. And I have to say, I had that with Avery Brooks. So when Ira was asking questions about filming, I just have to be honest. One of the keys to what Avery and I did on Deep Space Nine is that we never found one another without other people around, because we were happily married individuals. And my God, we knew that the chemistry was intense. So much so that, Cirroc, you would have had a baby brother or sister. So, filming that and answering questions and having the opportunity to talk about my experience with Deep Space Nine, it was a love affair, not just with Avery, but with outer space. And it was my introduction into loving what I never thought I would. I'm gonna be honest, I was not a sci-fi geek. I had lost so many shows that week, and I didn't want to go for another one. But God bless my husband, Jerald. He said, you are going, and not only are you going to that meeting, you are going to get that role. But what he didn't know, that he wasn't going to be able to watch that role too much, because that kissing was intense. So to answer your question, there are things that I would actually tell the fans because I'm just honest with that, but I was so fortunate enough, and we all were fortunate enough to have someone who was willing to really understand everything that was happening on Deep Space Nine, not just what was written, but how we decided to invest, and was it worth investing in these characters. And I have to say, amen, I am so glad, because if it was not for Deep Space Nine, I would not be doing the Orville. So thank you so very much.
Now, Penny, I'm really glad that you decided to answer that question, because we have a scene that was not included in the documentary that might be a story you told. Let's show that to these folks now.
I'm in trouble now.
I remember my first time on the set when I met Cirroc. He was not scheduled to work that day, and he was in the corner, and I could see him in my peripheral. And he's turned sideways, and he has like a 12-inch erection. Yeah, that's what I said, a 12-inch erection.
Is it bothering someone?
And all of a sudden, I just had to stop, and I looked.
It wasn't really erection. It was obviously a prop.
He pulls out a paper towel roll. It was a prank. I guess it was to just soften the blow, you know, for me coming on the set. But no one on the set broke except me, because I guess they were all in on this prank.
Well, Avery must have been on it, because he would never have done that without telling
Absolutely.
Avery.
He was in on it,
Wow.
and he laughed, and I thought, oh my gosh. So it broke the ice, and it was just lovely, and then Avery went over and did this like fatherly thing with him, and that was my first day, and that was a very funny day, and I'll never forget it. And Cirroc forever will be in my heart for breaking the ice, for doing that thing that he did.
And now he's a grown man, so I can't even look at him the same way. Whoa!
I'm wondering for the rest of the cast, as you watched the documentary for the first time, were there other stories, maybe less personal, that surprised you?
I actually loved the whole Nana Mark thing. I thought that was fabulous. I mean, if knowing the two of them, it's like neither one of them was going to back down, and that happened in front of the camera, and that happened behind the camera. And I had no idea it went to the extreme that it went to.
So Ira, for someone who hasn't seen the documentary, explain the Nana that...
Well, let's just say that Gul Dukat
/ Mark Alimo.
You know...
Slash is the important part.
Actors play characters, and the truth is, I find that there's a little bit of who they are in that character. So there was a little Mark Limo and Gul Dukat, and there was a lot of, you know, Kira and a lot of Nana in Kira. Anyway, there was the sexual tension in the show was also there behind the scenes, at least in one direction.
In one direction.
That's fair.
Are we still talking about that paper towel thing?
I'm just glad I didn't meet you that way the first time.
Oh boy.
But Aron, there was something very important that you learned about your character as you made the documentary, and that is...
I was told not to talk about this. I'll just say I had two very polarizing emotions in the documentary. As to answer your question earlier, it was really emotional for me to talk about the opportunity I had to play Nog on the show and all the wonderful stories they gave me to tell. And obviously I start crying in the episode because it truly, truly meant so much to me to to be given what you gave me. Before I cry again, I'll switch to the polarizing emotion was extreme anger and hate. Not hate, it wasn't really hate, but extreme anger towards what happens to Nog. That's all I have to say.
And to find out, you have to watch the documentary, but that involves the season 8 premiere.
Yeah, I signed a contract not to say what happened.
That's fair.
They brought me into the bathroom, shoved me into the corner, and made me sign contracts not to say anything.
I will say one thing in terms of what surprised me about doing the doc is, and Aaron is a beautiful example of this, how close to the bone the show still is for the cast and crew. You know, we all tend to focus on not necessarily failure, but things that didn't work out the way we want them to. Those we obsess about all the time, and they stay with us. Success, for some reason, is tougher to look at, I think, for a lot of people. It's just, okay, we did that, it was great, but now we have to always move forward. We don't look back. And suddenly, when you take the time to look back, you go, holy shit, this is like, we did some good stuff here. And not only if good or bad, it doesn't matter. It meant something to us. It really affected us. And it really blew my mind. I mean, Aaron's a great example because he really let it show and really went through it. But crew members, you know, got very emotional. And I'm not just saying tears. People got angry. People got passionate. People, you know, it meant something. Something happened. 7 years, not a short time, you know? 26 episodes a year, not a small load to carry. So that's the thing that I took away from it. We shared this thing. We hadn't really looked at it. We hadn't really examined it for a long time. And then we all examined it together, kind of. And that was nice.
And other people who were extremely passionate about the series were the fans. Talk about the decision to go to a crowdsourcing campaign, and were you expecting it to be as overwhelmingly successful as it was?
Well, I think I can speak to that. The quick answer is no. We had used crowdfunding for the love of Spock, and we're successful on Kickstarter. And I decided to try Indiegogo and was told, you guys are going to be lucky if you make your goal. Set it low. You know, it's Deep Space Nine. We're not sure. So we set a very modest goal of $150,000 and blew through it in about 24 hours. So, and then we ended up becoming the most successfully funded documentary on Indiegogo. So that's when this, thanks to everyone. So that's when we realized we got to get our butts in gear here.
That was a wake-up call.
That was a wake-up call. This is not an hour documentary. This has become something much bigger.
Just the crowd reaction to it.
Absolutely, it justified. It showed that there was a desire for this.
Well, the fans made it into a feature
no
film.
question.
There's no doubt about it.
No question.
The fans made it suddenly, you know, we had to deliver something beyond what certainly I thought the goal was. That changed everything, and that's all up to the fans.
Some of what changed with that were the stretch goals, and with that was the HD footage that I know every fan in this room loved seeing when they got a chance to see it, or will love seeing when you get a chance to see it. Talk about the process, because what a lot of people don't necessarily understand is CBS isn't the one who decided to make this transfer. You guys did this on your own. Talk about the hurdles of getting that done and how much footage you actually got to see in HD.
You want to speak to that?
No?
I'm not on this panel. You got to answer.
All right. All right. Here's the quick answer is Deep Space Nine was shot on 35 millimeter, but they posted in video. So what you see now is SD. And Ira drives him insane, you know, what the show looks like on regular television.
I've only seen 2 episodes
He refuses
since 1999. I refuse.
Well, because he
personal-
saw it, I mean, in 35, and the 35 exists, but it's in a salt mine in somewhere in the East Coast, and we convinced CBS Digital, they had to go find those reels. First of all, they didn't even know where everything was, what we were getting. We estimated at first we were going to get about 120 camera reels. We ended up with 400, over 400. And we still have all that, by the way.
We're the only
and
ones
we're it.
that
We're it. We're the only people that do. But so we, originally a stretch goal was 5 minutes of HD footage. Then we're looking at the full film, and it was so glaring going from HD to SD. In our montages, Ira made the decision, said, either we have to do it all. And so we just decided to do all 20 minutes in HD.
And we blew, that was in August of 2018, and that literally the day I told everyone we were going to do the full 22 in HD, that was the day we realized we were not going to make our goal to get the film out in 2018, that basically, we were going to disappoint a lot of fans, but I just felt it took a long time to get there, but it just suddenly became, there was just no way that we could put out a product that on one hand looked beautiful and on the other hand looked like a muddy, old TV series from, the dark ages. So it just, it ultimately was worthwhile to do it, and it's to just see Jonathan West when he was colorizing the film, the HD. I mean, Jonathan was the DP of the show for 4 years, and I walked into the room, these guys have been working all day, and he was looking at the monitor, and he looked like he was having a religious experience. He was so happy because he said he knew all the way back then, he knew what they were getting on film, and no one was going to see it. No one was ever going to see it the way it really looked. And to finally, after 25 freaking years, to see it with his own eyeballs, he was just in heaven. He was just in absolute heaven.
And we were told in the roundtable that you could see on the disc that there were even moments where he's like, no, this isn't quite color corrected properly because I remember that wall being a specific color.
He remembered everything. It was emblazoned in his brain, from all these years, every episode, every shade of every color. It was impressive.
That was a surprise in the DS9 documentary. I really enjoyed watching Jonathan West in that scene and being just like, oh, this is finally going to be what I wanted it to be and what I saw it to be. That was really interesting for me.
He got really emotional too in the interview.
Yep. And you also did something else really unique. During those writing room sequences, you chose to animate the scenes that they were pitching. Talk about the decision to do animation for those moments.
That was these guys. That was their idea.
Yeah,
But he's not on the panel.
Yeah.
Kai,
Yeah.
Kai, one of the producers of the film, is now officially part of the panel.
Welcome, sir.
But Kai was...
He was instrumental.
He was instrumental.
And CBS, we ran it by them, and they said yes, which was a major thing, because we can't just go ahead and do this without any permission, but they were totally supportive, and we found a great artist to do it, and I think it works. I really do. I think those are exciting sequences.
Yeah, except Garak is...
Nog looked like he had one too many donuts, but that's okay. It is older, yeah.
I do think it's important, though, to note, because you've mentioned it here several times, that CBS was not reluctant to do a lot of, I mean, they were supportive of you doing this. They weren't necessarily going to do it themselves, but they were...
Yeah, well, I think that's what it was. They're like, let him do it. We don't have the time or for whatever reason. And I know they were very happy with For the Love of Spock. So they were like, yes, okay, you can go ahead and do this. And once Ira was on board, it was like, okay. And they basically took a very hands-off approach.
Yeah, they let us
must
do
say.
it. That's
that was
major
incredible.
thing, is that they didn't block us.
Not at all.
They stood back, and certainly CBS Digital with the amount of work they had to do with all those reels of film. It's amazing, you know. That's not my skill to find all those little clips that we needed out of all those rolls of those beautiful 35 millimeter rolls of film.
I want to ask the cast, Andy especially, several of you participated at great length in the campaign, the Indiegogo campaign, little vignettes and, you know, how important was it to you guys, because you certainly weren't obligated to tell this story, how important was it for you to see this documentary made?
No, it was very important for me. I'm not over elaborating when I say this show changed my life. It really did. I'd never, for instance, worked on one character over a period of 7 years. I was working with a group of people I've worked with a lot on stage, you know, like Renee and Armin and so forth. And I'm really superb people. But it did change my life. And I found, and the thing is that I've only recently admitted, or not admitted, but discovered, was that I found a freedom that I had never, I've been doing this acting shit for a long time. And I mean a long time. And I had never had the experience. You know, you work with masks when you're in drama school and you do commedia and stuff like that. But to work with a mask that then really became an extension of me in a very wonderful way, and wonderful in the sense that the writers clearly loved to write for Garak. Mm-hmm. That's why Garak has all those lines that we all adore, lines I still use and live by, like, about, you know, never telling the same lie twice. I mean, you know, that only makes sense. But it was like, but then to come back, and so anyway, this mask freed me in a way where that I had been rarely free, you know, in my career, rarely, and I've been very fortunate. I've managed to do I've had some great roles thrown at me, so to come back and then do work with these guys again. And to kind of like go over it or do this, I don't know what you would call it. It's not an elegy. I mean, it's a celebration, really. That's what it is. It's a celebration. And people that I came to love a lot. Came to love them because I love people who are professional, people who bring it, who when they come, they bring everything. Don't hold anything back. And that was this group, you know, both on both sides of the camera.
I want to say we were all extremely invested in the documentary because we were all extremely invested in this show. Back to what Ira said, for 7 years, or 5 for me, and you know, about as much for a lot of the recurring cast, we knew what we had when we had it. You know, Deep Space Nine was a bit of a Camelot. It was extremely special to us, and I remember that last day, Ira, when you were telling all of us the day that what we left behind was wrapped, and Ira climbed up on the scaffolding on the wall of the soundstage where we all were having lunch together for one last time, and we knew that we would never all be together again. This team of people that created this incredible piece of work, fun and funny and dramatic and heartful and important, with so many issues that touched our hearts as well as yours. And when Ira said how much this show meant to him, there wasn't a dry eye among us. This wasn't just a job. So for us, this documentary was such a beautiful opportunity to hearken back to these stories and these friendships and these issues. And yet, we've always been seen as the little runt brother of Star Trek. We were not. People tell us, right, I mean, keep it going. No, people People tell us all the time, Deep Space Nine is my favorite Star Trek, or even Deep Space Nine is my favorite show of all time. And yet, we are not next gen, we didn't get the movies, and. So, it was wonderful to hear that we were being so heartily welcomed back, and it really reminds me of even the first Star Trek, how the fans insisted on bringing that show back in the 60s, and the fans insisted on doing such a beautiful job and bringing all the funds that came in for this documentary. And I think it's just a beautiful parallel about Star Trek being driven by you guys and by by wonderful creators who carry the flag.
But it wasn't an obligation to do this documentary. To me, it was a duty, and there is a slight difference. For me, it was a duty in the sense that I never felt that we were the stepchildren. I just have never felt that. I felt that we were the ones to really hit on issues that people were encountering on their day-to-day lives, and we just happened to be years before you. For my experience, and I spoke on this earlier today, it was the family that was most important to me. And being an African American, it was about a family that was rooted in honesty, was rooted in purpose, and rooted in leadership. And for me, Deep Space Nine, I think it paved the way. I did another show many years, a few years after, and people were saying, do you think you paved the way for Barack Obama to come into the presidency? That was 24 at the time. And I thought, yeah, but you know what? When you really think about it, it was Deep Space Nine. It was the innovative creativity of the creators to put an African American in leadership, and then to take away his color, and you just see the strength of a human being. And to me, again, not an obligation, but an honor. And it was our duty to make sure that we can take color away, and in the future, maybe we can be just strong as a people. And I think that is exactly what Deep Space Nine represented.
Beautifully said. I want to ask, what to you is the core of Star Trek? What makes the spirit of Star Trek?
Wow, that's a loaded question to kind of end the evening. We could talk about that for hours. I think, the one thing that was said in the documentary, and I think you saw it in we put it in the trailer, is when Jeff Combs said, it's not about the journey out, it's the journey in, And I think science fiction, especially on television, is never about the future. It's always about today, whatever today is when it's airing. So that's what Star Trek is about. It's about today. The fact that we put dots and noses and things and ears on people, it enables us to talk about things that the networks and studios would be a little nervous about if we were doing it in modern dress. So that's, I think, what Gene ultimately gave us all, the opportunity to discuss the human condition. Now, yes, it's couched in these very optimistic terms that Deep Space Nine certainly dove into and tried to look at and see whether it was feasible or not. But I think the human condition in all its strengths and failures is really what Star Trek is about. And the fact that, people can work together, there is hope. Yes, there can still be war, there can still be money, there can still be conflict in the 24th century, but it's still an optimistic take. Human beings are still recognizable. We still care for each other. Nog and Jake's friendship, there's a million examples of the show of what is possible, you know, if we allow it to be. Now, it's a big task because, let's face it, you know, doesn't seem like we're getting closer to it. It seems like we're drifting further away from it at the moment. But that's a clarion call not to give up, you know, but to strive harder to get there. That's what we have to remember, you know. And that's what Deep Space Nine did and what all the shows did in their own way. That's what it's about, the human condition, making it better.
That's pretty well.
We've got, no, please.
Well, as you all know, Gene spoke about creating morality. Gene spoke about creating morality plays, and the heart of Star Trek is really about how to become more human and how to do our responsibilities as human beings to each other and live within infinite diversity and infinite combination. And, you know, Ira said something really prescient in the 5th season, how Deep Space Nine would really hit its stride of popularity 20 years after the show went out of production. And he said it because he could see that streaming was going to be coming and it would be easier to follow the show and the brave serialization that Ira and his team created that demanded so much of its audience. And I also think that the show is more important now than ever, as he said, because this world needs more Star Trek. We need IDIC. We need you guys to be the real Starfleet, creating that in the world. Not to change the subject at all, but that's why I founded Pop Culture Hero Coalition. We're using these stories like Star Trek in schools. And that's what we all need to do in the world every day, is to create a world where we can all live long and prosper.
Hey, can I just want to make one more thing on top of what Ira said. One of the things, Cirroc and I have been talking to a lot of fans of the show leading up to Star Trek Las Vegas. And the common theme that I think hasn't been touched upon is connections. As you take the human element, as Ira said, it's the connections that all of us make through this world of Star Trek, this family that has been created from Gene Roddenberry that lives on to today as we move into Discovery and Picard and all the other shows and our show. And as one of the things we were talking about in the episode The Negus was how important the friendship was between two different species that leads to, you know, one changing course in a whole nother way that nobody in his race ever did. And that was such an important moment. And that, to me, speaks so much about what Star Trek is these kind of connections that we make and how they change all of our lives in the most positive and beautiful ways. And that's why all of you have filled this room today. That's why we're here today. That's why the documentary is made. And that's why there'll be many more in the future to come, because it's the connections we've all made. And what's really beautiful is the connections he and I continue to make as we go through our show that we're doing, our little show. So I wanted to say that. And all of us are in this together, and we're all one big family. And that's what I found in talking, and Cirroc in talking to these fans, and what we found watching the show, these little subtexts of these little moments. But anyway, I wanted to say that. So thank you. Thank you very much.
I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. We want to show you just one more very short clip as we close out the night, but thank you all for coming. And you can come to the booth 4118 anytime this weekend and pick up the documentary. Thanks for coming, guys.